we're going to go on an adventure to understand how machinists transitioned from this to this, and what any of it has to do with navigation in the age of sail, how research into World War II naval guns created the automated machine tool industry, and what's so special about the letter G. In this video, we're going to look at CNCs, and in the next video, we're going to look at G-code. We're going to wrap up the whole thing by generating G-code to carve these custom drawer faces, and then running it on our CNC. So let's get to it. This is our CNC. I asked it to move 3 feet to right here. I mean, look at that, it's right on the money. How does it do that with so much precision? In a high-end machine tool, the answer to that question is exactly what you might expect. There's a kind of ruler inside of the machine, and there's a sensor that reads that ruler. An active control system looks at the ruler and nudges the arm until it gets exactly where it was told to go. This is called closed loop, or sometimes servo control. But interestingly, this CNC, like most CNCs and other 3D printers, doesn't have any internal rulers. It doesn't really know where it is, and yet we've already seen just how remarkably accurate it can be. So how can that possibly be? I mean, imagine an equivalent. How would a navigator in the age of sail without GPS, in the dark, in the fog, just by guessing, know where it's going? I mean, it just sounds nuts. Let's explore that analogy for a moment and see if we can make sense of it. Suppose a ship captain starts a journey here, and they want to sail up here. But it's night, in the fog, etc. They can't see more than a few hundred feet. So how can they do this? Well, suppose they have a compass, a watch, and a cork tied to a string. So they can use the compass to set off in the right direction. And they can estimate their speed by tossing the cork overboard and then timing how long it takes to get from bow to stern. From that, they can estimate their speed. So let's say they continue like that for about an hour, and that puts them, here-ish. Obviously, they didn't measure their heading and speed perfectly, so they know they don't exactly know where they are, but they're somewhere in this circle. Now they return and repeat the process. So they think they're here. But wait, that was under the assumption that they started in the middle of the first circle. But maybe they started here, or maybe they started here, or maybe it was here. So see, the second circle is much larger than the first circle. And what's worse is that some of those paths sink the ship. Errors in estimated position compound over time. That is, it works for a little while, but not for very long. By the way, modern navigators still learn this technique of estimation in case they ever lose communication or modern navigational aids. The technique has a great name. It's called dead reckoning. I love this phrase, and it's also so old that nobody really knows where it came from. I like to imagine that sailors used this term back in the day because those who relied on it too much ended up dead. Returning to our CNC, if it doesn't have an internal ruler, then it must be using dead reckoning, right? Wrong. And to understand how that's possible, it's the difference between this and this. Maybe you think I'm going to look up something in this book, but I'm not. I'm not even interested in the contents of the book. What I'm interested in is the thickness of the pages. Look, this book is 5/8 of an inch thick, which is 625 thous. And there's 578 pages, which is 289 sheets of paper. So that's about 2.1 thous per page. So suppose I wanted to move 1/8 of an inch up. That's 125 thous or 60 pages. In other words, I can just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 57, 58, 59, 60. So here's 60 pages. So that should be 1/8 of an inch. Simple. You just count some number of very small steps. This is the same trick that these motors use to track where they are. They move in discrete, repeatable steps. Hence they're called stepper motors because they step instead of spin. There are higher-end stepper motors that include internal rulers, but these less expensive ones do not. Hence they're called open-loop steppers. They have no feedback to know if they've actually arrived at their destination. So how does a stepper motor make such a small step? There's a set of electromagnetic coils wrapped around the axle. When you energize this coil, the axle is attracted to this pole. When you de-energize it and energize the next one, then the axle turns a little bit. You repeat around the loop. All you have to do is turn on each electromagnet in sequence. But there's a few implications. First, there's a minimum movement. You can't move smaller than a step. If you lose count, all bets are off. You have to start from a known location at the beginning, and finally, every step has to be perfectly repeatable. That last statement's the hard part. If you've ever tried to build a machine or a jig, you know how hard it can be to make something large perfectly stable. These CNCs are engineered to stay within reasonable machining limits, but of course, they aren't foolproof. When this motor steps, it's pushing against a load of this arm, and of course the resistance of cutting as it moves. Obviously, the little magnets in here aren't super strong, and so we could restrain this arm and we'd be able to stop it from moving despite the force of the magnet trying to make it move. In which case, because it's an open loop system, it has no way to know that it missed a step, and therefore its position would be off from that moment forward. Here's the control box for the CNC. Let's look inside. There's two main parts in here. Over here, we see 4 wires. These sets of wires control the 4 stepper motors. There's 2 for the y-axis, 1 for the x, and 1 for the z. Over here is the computer chip. This computer chip is generating and counting the pulses which switch these magnet power lines on and off. Here I have a stepper motor. As you can see, as I connect it to the power supply, it turns slightly. But counting the pulses isn't the entire story, because there's also the timing. As we said, there's forces pushing back against these stepper motors, so the computer needs to ensure there's sufficient time for the arm to react to each of those steps. And that's what determines how fast it can move, or as a machinist would call it, the feed rate. They call it that because originally machinists would have been feeding material into a cutter. The computer can generate these pulses really slowly to ensure the arm has time to react, but then of course the tool would move very slowly, and nobody really wants a slow tool. The optimal timing involves a little bit of extra mathematics where we calculate the forces from Newton's law. It's a great application of high school math, which is probably a good story for another day. Okay, so let's review where we are. Working backwards, we have this: a cutting bit connected to a spindle attached to an arm with a gear, a stepper motor driving the gear, pulses of high power energizing the motor's magnets, pulses of low power commanding those high power wires, and finally coordinates feeding the microcontroller. Boy, that's a lot of parts, and we got a little ways to go. So for now, we're going to look at this part, the coordinates. Well, coordinates are really just some numbers, right? I mean, it sounds simple, but it has a surprisingly fascinating history that dates back to the very early years of the 19th century. It involves looms, naval warfare, and breaking codes in World War II. And it doesn't even arrive at the machining standards until the 1960s. There's just so much cool history here. Let's look at it. Like so many advances on the electronics of the modern world, the turning point was World War II. The Navy needed a way to automate those huge guns on battleships to hit targets miles away from the deck of a rolling ship. This and similar tasks needed closed-loop mechanical control systems, since obviously that sort of control was way beyond the abilities of humans to operate in real time. There was a very influential lab at MIT during World War II called the Servo Lab, which developed these closed-loop gun control systems. And obviously, if you can build a servo to position a huge naval gun to hit a target from a rolling ship 30 miles away, then you can do the same thing to automate a machine tool. Incidentally, the MIT Servo Lab still exists, and a lot of interesting people have worked at it throughout the decades. Among them was one of my personal favorite scientists, Claude Shannon, who invented information theory. But really, that's a story for another day. Once electromechanical servo control was applied to machine tools, those tools were called numerically controlled to differentiate them from human control. And we still pay homage to this term every time we save files for CNCs, because the extension is .nc for numerical control. The MIT Servo Lab needed some way to store those machining coordinates to plug them into early numerical control computers. And there was really only one viable solution for this in the 1950s. Not thumb drives, not floppy disks, holes punched into paper. Punching holes into paper to encode information has a surprisingly long history. This is the Jacquard loom, invented in about 1806. And you can see the cards here, holes punched into them. This placement of those holes allowed some pins to move or not, which pulled individual threads, which allowed the shuttle in the loom to go over or under cross threads and ultimately make complex patterns line by line. The exact mechanism used for this was amazing. And it was kind of like the AI tech boom of its day. But that's yet another story for another day. Boy, we're really accumulating a story debt in this video, aren't we? Another well-known example of the paper tape was the player piano from a little bit later in the 19th century. The holes in the paper allowed a cam to hit the appropriate keys on the piano. All right, let's jump ahead 100 years. By the time the Servo Lab was starting to automate machine tools, paper tape was already a well-established technology, and it was the logical choice to encode coordinates for machining. All right, we've made it to here, all the way from cutter back to coordinates. But there's one part of this diagram left. How are those coordinates encoded on the memory device, be that a paper tape or its modern equivalent, a thumb drive? That's the story of how NC, numerical control, came to be CNC, computer numerical control. And that's the story of G-code. So please check out part 2 of this video, where we're going to look at the history of how computing and machining came together. We're going to see how this was related to breaking the German Enigma codes during World War II, and we'll finally see what's up with the letter G. All right, you've made it this far, so we really hope you'll join us in the next video, where we're going to generate some G-code and carve a custom drawer face on our CNC.